Narrated by Randall Townsend.
In 1965. Coronavirus was identified in 1965 as one of the first infectious replicatable viral models that could be used to modify a series of other experiences of the human condition. It was isolated once upon a time associated with the common cold. But what's particularly interesting about its isolation in 1965 was that it was immediately identified as a pathogen that could be used and modified for a whole host of reasons. And you heard me correctly, that was 1965. And by the way, these slides are public domain. You're welcome to look at every single reference. Every comment that I made is based on published material, so do make sure that you look at those references. But in 1966, the very first COV coronavirus model was used as a transatlantic biological experiment in human manipulation. And you heard the date, 1966. I hope you're getting the point of what I'm saying. This is not an overnight thing. This is actually something that's been long in the making. A year before I was born, we had the first transatlantic coronavirus data sharing experiment between the United States and the United Kingdom. And in 1967, the year I was born, we did the first human trials on inoculating people with modified coronavirus. Isn't that amazing? 56 years ago, the overnight success of a pathogen that's been 56 years in engineering. And I want that to chill with all of you. Where were we when we actually allowed, in violation of biological and chemical weapons treaties, where were we as a human civilization when we thought it was an acceptable thing to do to take a pathogen for the United States and infect the world with it? Where was that conversation? And what should have been that conversation in 1967? That conversation wasn't had. Ironically, the common cold was turned into a chimera in the 1970s. And in 1975, 1976, and 1977, we started figuring out how to modify coronavirus by putting it into different animals, pigs and dogs. And not surprisingly, by the time we got to 1990, we found out that coronavirus as an infectious agent was an industrial problem for two primary industries, the industries of dogs and pigs. Dog breeders and pigs found that coronavirus created gastrointestinal problems, and that became the basis for Pfizer's first spike protein vaccine patent filed, are you ready for this, in 1990. Did you hear what I just said? 1990. Operation Warp Speed? I'm sorry. Where's the warp and the speed? Pfizer, 1990, the very first spike protein vaccine for coronavirus. Isn't that fascinating? Isn't it fascinating that we were told that, well, the spike protein is a new thing. We just found out that that's the problem. No. As a matter of fact, we didn't just find out it was not just now the problem. We found that out in 1990 and filed the first patents on vaccines in 1990 for the spike protein of coronavirus. And who would have thought? Pfizer. Clearly the innocent organization that does nothing but promote human health. Clearly Pfizer. The organization that has not bought the votes in this chamber and in every chamber of every government around the world. Not that Pfizer. Certainly they wouldn't have had anything to do with this. But oh yes, they did. And in 1990 they found out that there was a problem with vaccines. They didn't work. Do you know why they didn't work? It turns out that coronavirus is a very malleable model. It transforms and it changes and it mutates over time. As a matter of fact, every publication on vaccines for coronavirus from 1990 until 2018, every single publication concluded that coronavirus escapes the vaccine impulse because it modifies and mutates too quickly for vaccines to be effective. And since 1990 to 2018, that is the published science, ladies and gentlemen. That's following the science. Following the science is their own indictment of their own programs that said it doesn't work. And there are thousands of publications to that effect, not a few hundred, and not paid for by pharmaceutical companies. These are publications that are independent scientific research that shows unequivocally, including efforts of the chimera modifications made by Ralph Baric from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. All of them show vaccines do not work on coronavirus. That's the science. And that science has never been disputed. But then we had an interesting development in 2002, and this date is most important because in 2002, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill patented, and I quote, an infectious replication defective clone of coronavirus. Listen to those words, infectious replication defective. What does that phrase actually mean? For those of you not familiar with language, let me unpack it for you. Infectious replication defective means a weapon. It means something meant to target an individual, but not have collateral damage to other individuals. That's what infectious replication defective means. And that patent was filed in 2002 on work funded by NIAID's Anthony Fauci from 1999 to 2002, and that work, patented at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, mysteriously preceded SARS 1.0 by a year. Dave, are you suggesting that SARS 1.0 wasn't from a wet market in Wuhan? Are you suggesting it might have come from a laboratory in the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill? No, I'm not suggesting it. I'm telling you that's the facts. We engineered SARS. SARS is not a naturally occurring phenomenon. The naturally occurring phenomenon is called the common cold. It's called influenza-like illness. It's called gastroenteritis. That's the naturally occurring coronavirus. SARS is the research developed by humans weaponizing a life system model to actually attack human beings, and they patented it in 2002. And in 2003, giant surprise, the CDC filed the patent on coronavirus isolated from humans in violation, once again, of biological and chemical weapons treaties and laws that we have in the United States. And I'm very, very precise on this. The United States likes to talk about its rights and everything else and the rule of law and all the nonsense that we like to talk about. But we don't ratify treaties about, I don't know, defending humans. We conspicuously avoid that. We actually have a great track record of advocating for human rights and then denying them when it comes to actually being part of the international community, which is a slightly problematic thing. But let's get something very clear. When the CDC in April of 2003 filed the patent on SARS coronavirus isolated from humans, what did they do? They downloaded a sequence from China and filed a patent on it in the United States. Any of you familiar with biological and chemical weapons treaties knows that's a violation. That's a crime. That's not an innocent oops. That's a crime. And the United States Patent Office went as far as to reject that patent application on 2 occasions until the CDC decided to bribe the Patent Office to override the patent examiner to ultimately issue the patent in 2007 on SARS coronavirus. But let's not let that get away from us, because it turns out that the RT-PCR, which was the test that we allegedly were going to use to identify the risks associated with coronavirus, was actually identified as a bioterrorism threat by me in the European Union-sponsored events in 2002 and 2003, 20 years ago. That happened here in Brussels and across Europe.
Truth is illegal in America now. Truth is prohibited in America.
Mr. Kennedy, your bizarre, unproven claim echoes that same historic slander of labeling Jews and Chinese people as a race, and that Jews, and in this case Chinese people, somehow manage to avoid a deadly illness that targets other groups for death. You do see that, yes or no?
You're misstating.
No.
You are.
I quoted what you said earlier, and it is directly what you said. So just ask me yes or no.
I was describing an NIH-funded study.
No, you didn't cite any.
I was describing an NIH-funded study by Cleveland Clinic
Reclaiming
scientists.
Reclaiming my time. You did not reference reclaiming my time.
Published in USC Medical, which is one of...
The time is mine. I'm reclaiming it. Please ask the witness to stop talking.
You asked me a question.
Reclaiming.
Allow me to answer my question.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like about 10 seconds back.
You are slandering me incorrectly. You're saying it's dishonest.
Time belongs to the gentlelady from Florida.
Defend myself.
Mr.
Time
Chairman,
belongs to the gentlelady from Florida.
I'd like 15 seconds back.
We will be happy to give you that.
Thank you so much. You did not cite any study like you are citing here now during that conversation. You referenced no study at all. You simply labeled Jews and Chinese people as a race, and you also said that somehow they managed to avoid a deadly illness that targets other groups for death.
Once you speak the truth, they become enraged that somebody dared to say truth.
Yes.
This is the war in this country. Truth is illegal in America now. Truth is prohibited in America. And they will not stop until you submit. This is about submission. It is about submission to their agenda, to their rule. And they are going to go after everybody.
It's quite impressive, though, that Pfizer worldwide went from at $190 billion right there towards the beginning of 2021 and skyrocketed at the end of 2021 to $330 billion worldwide. That's quite impressive, thanks to the American taxpayer and thanks to the CDC director, Dr. Walensky, who said that vaccines were safe and effective. I'd also like to talk to you on behalf of all the pregnant women, not people, as you call them. To quote you on August 11th, 2021, CDC encourages all pregnant people, it's women, by the way, who are thinking about becoming pregnant and those breastfeeding to get vaccinated to protect themselves from COVID-19. This has also been ignored. The amount of miscarriages and stillbirths that increased drastically due to your advice to get vaccinated. Pregnant women again, not people. And then we could go on and on about the tragic stories of myocarditis and many other things. But my question for you today, Dr. Walensky, is now that you're going to be leaving the CDC pretty soon, what job are you going to take? Are you going to be on the board of either Pfizer or Moderna? Because you've done one hell of a job at making sure that they've made a lot of money. And I yield back.
Thank you for that question. Maybe first I will comment that CDC is not responsible for the purchase of vaccines, so I can't speak to all of the economics that you spoke to. I do want to talk a minute about the vaccine adverse event reporting system. So that system is intended for any person who has gotten a vaccine, if they have an untoward event after that vaccine, whether or not is related to the vaccine, they report. It is intended to have an over-reporting. All of the not all, most of the vaccines that were being given, remember we gave 676 million doses of the vaccine. Any adverse event, if you got hit by a truck after you got your vaccine, that was reported to the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. We at CDC have a responsibility to comb through every single one of them, to review the medical charts and to see if they are related. It is the case that the vaccine doesn't prevent being hit.
Ms. Walensky, I'll reclaim my time. You did nothing about that and continued to push vaccines. That's what the American people care about.
We review all of the things that come into the vaccine adverse event reporting system. I'd be happy to have our staff educate your staff on the work.
I don't want my staff educated. You should educate the American people about what you've done of 1.5 million reports, because they feel like you've done nothing and continue to say safe and effective.
Maybe I will just close by saying I don't have plans after I step down.
My name is Christine Anderson. I'm a member of European Parliament, and I'm answering your SOS call. I will do whatever I can to make it known to the world that your once free and liberal democracy has been transformed into a totalitarian regime which tramples on human rights, civil liberties, and the rule of law. I'm imploring all of you around the world who still think your governments are looking out for your best interest. At no point in history have the people forcing others into compliance been the good guys. The welfare of humanity has always been the alibi of tyrants. Do you not realize that this vaccine does not protect you from COVID? It does, however, protect you from governmental oppression. For now, that is. But don't think for even a second that this is not going to change tomorrow. I'm a German, and we once asked our grandparents how they could have just stood by in silence, allowing a horrific totalitarian regime to come about. Anyone could have known. All they had to do was open their eyes and take a look. The vast majority chose not to. So, what will you tell your grandchildren? Will you tell them you didn't know? Will you tell them you were just following orders? You need to understand, it isn't about breaking the fourth wave. It is all about breaking people. Australia does not need a no-COVID strategy. What Australia needs is a no-oppression strategy. So I stand in support with your fight for freedom and democracy. We need to stop our governments from transforming our free and democratic societies into totalitarian regimes. We need to do it now. We need to stand up now.
In the next 2 weeks, we've been warned, there's going to be darkness. We're almost at a point of grid collapse. It's a reality that South Africans must know, that we're heading to darkness, and ANC politicians are continuing business as usual, as if we are not in a crisis. We are in a deep crisis. Cell phone networks will not work. Water, even if we have it, we won't receive it because it needs electricity. Nothing is going to function. We're heading for a disaster worse than what COVID was. No one will go to work. The dead will have to be buried the same day, because there will not be fridges to keep them. No generator is meant to operate 24 hours. Generator is an intervention for a short while. Even those who have generators will not be saved from the mess we are going into. We warned you. We went to the streets because we knew this was coming. History will absolve us. We were called names, were ridiculed, were insulted. Police and the army were called on us for trying to protect us from where we are. They are just calling it stage 10 for nice word. The reality is that it's darkness. And it's not going to be darkness of 12 hours or 24 hours, it comes back. No. At times it's going to take 3 to 4 days. At times it will take a week. At times it will take a month without electricity. The whole leadership must go.
California is now considering a bill that would send children as young as 12 years old to group homes without the parents' permission.
This will affect every single parent in the state of California. I'll give you an example like this. Your 12-year-old has TikTok, your 12-year-old has a cell phone and social media, and you're not comfortable with the way that he or she is using that social media. You get in a huge fight, you take the phone away, you ground them for a week or two, and they go to school. Well, now the state has inserted these professional individuals, professional people on to public school campuses. And now your child is having a hard day. The teacher notices and recommends that they go get a counseling session. When they're at that session, they divulge, they share with this adult who they believe is a trusted adult who's taking care of them. And they share they had a total terrible blowout fight with you and your husband or your partner. They don't want to go home. They don't feel comfortable talking to you. And the professional person asks them if they want to go maybe cool off a couple of days and somewhere off campus and outside of the home. And your child says yes. My only children who have been found to be the victims of incest, child abuse, or a serious risk of harm to themselves or others can be removed from the home without their parents' knowledge and consent. If AB 665 passes the way that Wendy Carrillo and Senator Scott Wiener want it to pass, a 12-year-old who's deemed mature enough by the professional person can not only receive the mental health treatment, but can opt themselves out of their home into a residential facility, and the parent would never know.
It's pretty easy to beat the law if you're a...
Fentanyl is killing more than 70,000 Americans a year. Big, you got it.
I would like to see every leader who violated human rights over the last 3 years arrested and prosecuted.
How about this? Can we go from the patterns of your brain when you're looking at an image to reconstructing the image? So the way this worked was they put human beings inside an fMRI machine. They had them look at images and figure out what the patterns are, like translate from image to brain patterns. And then, of course, they would hide the image. So this is a image of a giraffe that the computer has never seen. It's only looking at the fMRI data, and this is what the computer thinks the human is seeing. What? Yeah. Now, to get state-of-the-art, here's where the combinatorial aspects, why you can start to see these are all the same demo. To do this kind of imaging, the latest paper, the one that happened even after this, which is already better, uses stable diffusion, uses the thing that you use to make art. Like, what should a thing that you use to make art have anything to do with reading your brain? But of course, it goes further. So in this one, they said, can they understand the inner monologue, the things you're saying to yourself in your own mind? Mind you, by the way, when you dream, like your visual cortex runs in reverse, so your dreams are no longer safe. But we'll try this. So they had people watch a video and just narrate what was going on in the video in their mind. So, the woman, she gets hit in the back, she falls over. This is what the computer reconstructed the person thinking. See a girl, looks just like me, get hit in the back, and then she is knocked off. So our thoughts, are starting to be decoded. Yeah, just think about what this means for authoritarian states, for instance. Or if you want to generate images that maximally activate your pleasure sensor or anything else. Okay, but let's keep going, right? To really get the sense of the combinatorics of this. How about, can we go from Wi-Fi radio signals, sort of like the Wi-Fi routers in your house, they're bouncing off radio signals that work sort of like sonar. Can you go from that to where human beings are to images? So what they did is they had, a camera looking at a space with people in it. That's sort of like coming in from one eye. The other eye is the radio signals, so sonar from the Wi-Fi router. And they just learned to predict, this is where the human beings are. Then they took away the camera, so all the AI had was the language of radio signals bouncing around the room, and this is what they're able to reconstruct. Real-time 3D pose estimation, right? So suddenly AI has turned every Wi-Fi router into a camera that can work in the dark, specially tuned for tracking living beings. But, luckily, that would require hacking Wi-Fi routers to be able to, do something with that. But how about this? I mean, computer code, that's just a type of language. So you can say, and this is a real example that I tried, GPT, find me a security vulnerability, then write some code to exploit it.
People all across the world are hungry, are thirsty for freedom. They want their own officials to be accountable and to respond in front of the public. So the alternative that was presented to us with this pandemic, this was the best opportunity for some elites that are not elected by anybody, who are not accountable to anybody, to pretty much hijack, day by day, month by month, year by year, more and more of our rights, more and more of our assets, because we see that happening right now in many countries. You saw what happened in Canada, for example, when the truckers protested against Trudeau. He ordered that their bank accounts be blocked, and that happened. And at that point, we did not even have, they did not even have in Canada, the digital currency. Imagine what will happen when on your phone you will have the digital wallet, the digital currency, the digital vaccination certificate. So we saw what happened. And now just imagine in your worst case scenario what will happen if we allow the WHO to have so much power over our states, over our governments, our elected officials, and even over our judiciary. So the biggest threat that we are facing right now is a threat to our national sovereignty, to the supremacy of our constitutions, and implicitly, unfortunately, to our fundamental rights. Because if all of these powers that were granted through our constitutions to our national institutions or authorities will be handed over to a global institution that is not accountable to anybody, who's led by people who are not elected by us as citizens, then we are done with our rights. Because they can easily just pass a decision, or whatever you want to call it, to declare a pandemic. Once that is declared, the governments can impose draconical restrictive measures, and you will not be able to challenge that.
If you would like to be the change, smash that like button and join the Discord.